Has it been a good week for you? Have you been able to share Christ with other people? Has anyone shared Christ with you? Well, give it a thought this week. Ask God to help you talk to somebody this week, and there'll be someone that you'll be able to talk to that's waiting to hear your message. But you got to believe He's going to do it and look for the opportunities. This week I was able to talk to 3 separate people. All I did was plant some seeds. I'm getting to know the people where I live a little bit better. And I'm meeting people that are asking questions, hoping to develop another opportunity to share Christ with them in there. I can't get to where the teenagers are, so I'm counting on the teens to get to their group. Can't count on the senior citizens. Well, I guess I could get to that group. That's me. But there's always a place. But you got to be willing to do it. This week, we're going to take a look at Ruth once again. And Naomi is the big part of that. And as was shared to you last week out of chapter 1, verses 18 through 22, Naomi left Jerusalem with her husband to go to the land because it was famine, and they were going to go there to get food that they needed and substance to work with it. And when she got there, her 2 boys married 2 Moabite women, and everything seemed to be going good for the family. And then Naomi's husband died. And that's very difficult when that happens. But then after her husband died, is there an echo, or is that just me? Okay, it's just me. After her husband died, then her 2 children died. And to her, the men of the family were the security. At that time, if you're a woman without a husband, without family to take care of her, you were at a loss. And she was. She had lost everything, and she was at the place, what am I going to do? So today, when we're going through this message, that's what you're going to ask. What is she going to do? Try to discover, what will she really do? And then, how's she going to evaluate her own situation? While you're listening, think about your own life. What are you going to do? What crisis are you in now? What are you facing that you need a solution for? If you lost your family and had to move, what would that emotional feeling really be like? It says in chapter 1, verse 19, so the 2 of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And when come to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred up because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? They had an idea who it was. They were questioning. She looked a little bit different naturally. So she said to them, don't call me Naomi. I'm not the pleasant person you thought I was before. Call me Mara. I'm a little bit on the bitter side because she says, the Almighty has dealt bitterness with me. Now, this is her view. It's written there. It's clear. But that's not really what God was doing with her. That was her feeling. That is the truth. And sometimes you have feelings that don't match what God is doing in your life, but they're still there. And you have to know how to handle them. He says, I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Well, they came, and calamity comes to all of us, doesn't it, at times? Doesn't mean everything was initiated by God, but it was there, and you have to face it. But you don't have to devalue your own relationship with Him because you hit a hard spot. Nor do you forget Him when you run into fortune. Now, this is the truth. She has to decide. How much of Naomi's future did she really know? Now, you know and I know that Naomi did not have the big picture. They didn't know what was going to be in store for them, but we know just from reading. Likewise, you don't know the big picture of your life, but it's there. 4 months ago, our economy was prospering. Unemployment was an all-time low. College kids were going to college. High school kids were going to high school. Everybody was fully employed. And we had plenty of toilet paper, right? Then all of a sudden, the bottom fell out. Downward economy, social unrest, political turmoil, uncontrollable virus. But we don't have the big picture of what God is doing. Many Christians might be asking, why did this happen to me like Naomi and Ruth? But they don't have the full picture. They don't know everything that's going to be taking place, and we wouldn't expect them to. But God has revealed some things that you always need to remember in a crisis like this. Ephesians 2:8-9 through 10 says, "For by the grace of God you're saved through faith, and it's not your own doing, but it's the gift of God." We agree with that. Not a result of work, so that we can boast. We agree with that also. But we get a little bit lost when it comes to verse 10. For we are his workmanship. We are created to bring honor and glory to God. Created in Jesus Christ, look at that, for good works. Do you see good works up there? As Pastor Dave would say good works. Don't muffle it, say it really loud. Good works. Very good. What are you created for? For good works. Do you know what they are all the time? No, but God says, I've got a good work for you, and don't ever forget it. Which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And that's the direction that we're going, but we don't have the full big picture yet. Romans 12:1-2 simply says this, "I appeal to you, therefore, by the mercies of God, to present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service." If you're going to work on his team, you've got to give it all. You've got to be a 100% player, living for God 24/7. And you have to have a biblical view, not a secular view. And that doesn't always work. But you have to. Do not be conformed to this world. Or this world has the power to change you. God has the power to change you. His power is greater. You've got to decide where you're going to get your instructions from. Renew it. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You can renew your mind in only one way when it comes to God. You have to know what his word says. And if you think you're reading his word because you listened to Christian music or you saw a Christian film, you're just deceiving yourself. And the world's got control of you. He says, do not conform to this world, be transformed and renew your mind. Here, that by the testing you may discern what is the will and what is good, what is acceptable, and is perfect of God. God's not leaving you in the dark, but you have a responsibility to live 24/7 for him. And as you're living for him, your mind is being transformed, and you're starting to learn more and more and more alike Christ all the time. Like when Greg first got married, he didn't know anything about his wife. And you know a little bit now, don't you, Greg? It's okay, you can admit it. He knows a lot more, but not as much as his wife wants him to know. So Greg is constantly working on that. If I was to ask Greg right now, what's your wife's favorite color, your favorite dress, your favorite food, he would know those answers, but I'm not going to ask him. I won't put him on the spot. He's still learning. Likewise, you're doing the same thing when it comes to God. Naomi doesn't have the big picture. She has to learn, what is God doing? Remember Joseph? Joseph didn't have the big picture. Remember Daniel? Daniel didn't have the big picture. Remember yourself before you're saved? You didn't have the big picture. Ruth has come back into town with Naomi, and Naomi and Ruth come back into Bethlehem. And they have to face life like it really is. This is the reality. We've come back to survive. We've come back to live. but we're not going to live on words. We've got to do some work. And it's a nice thing about the Jewish system. They provided a way for people who wanted to work. They didn't have to go down to the welfare office and sign up. They had work for them to do. And if they wanted to get some food during the harvest season, they would go down during the harvest season. They always left the core of their crops on harvest, sometimes up to 30% of their field, so they could go down, harvest that, and take it home during that harvest time and have something to eat. So here it is. Look at verse 1, chapter 2. Now Naomi had relatives of her husband, a worthy man, the clan of Elimelech. This is my God is king, whose name was Boaz. He was an honest, faithful, strong man. Now that's just an introduction to him. That's just going to tell you. Did she know about Boaz before she started in? Yes, she did. Did Ruth know? No, she didn't. But she knew there was a Redeemer Kinsman. Now that's nothing new to that society. They had that all the time. It'd be new for us, but not for them. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, after whom I shall seek a favor of a man." And so she said, "Go, my daughter." So she's going to the field. If I'm going to get some, I got to go out there and work. So I'm going to go into the field. But I want to find good work, and I want to find work wherever I'm working. The employer will find favor, will give me permission, will show me some leniency, will be kind to me. That's what I'm looking for of going out there. It wasn't just a random place she was going to. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come upon the field that belonged to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. Now, it just happened to, it's not a happen. We look a little bit, that's where she was supposed to go. Did she know it? No. Did God know it? Yes. God knew all along. God has the big picture. You're going to go to the right place. And doesn't God say to commit our ways unto him and he'll direct our paths? She didn't know that verse, did she? Probably not, because it wasn't written yet. But she knew she had to work. She wasn't going to sit back for a call on the telephone. She says, I'm getting out, I'm going to go to work. I got to find a field. I can find favor. I got to be able to work. And she just happened to go into his field. It was the correct field. It was the right place to be. Did she know it at the time? No. Did she even know Boaz at the time? No. But she knew she had to get there. And if she'd been wrong, God would have redirected her path. But it's the right place. In verses 4 through 7, it says this. This is a little introduction hymn. This is behind the scenes. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. He had business apparently early in the morning to do. And he said to the reaper, Lord be with you. And he said, the Lord bless you. Just like we commonly say, good morning, how you doing? Good morning, how you doing? But we don't normally say, God bless you, do we? How come we don't say that? It's just not part of our vocabulary. But we could make it our vocabulary, couldn't we? You go to work tomorrow and people are expecting hello and you say, God bless you. They would stop and they would think. And they might say, thank you. Then you can move on to something greater. Common greeting. Boaz gets there and he's looking over the field. Now, he would know most of the workers that came to his field because they don't change from day to day, week to week, year to year. There's only so many people that come into the fields that are poor. But he looks in there and he sees this woman. And so he asked the charger of the reapers, that's the person in control, who is this woman? I've noticed a new worker. Who is she? He's looking at her. Don't recognize her, just wonder who she is. And so the servant who was in charge of the reaper answered, why, she's the young woman, the Moabite woman, who came back with Naomi from the country of the Moabites. Oh, okay. I've heard of her. We're going to find, he's heard of her. But he hadn't seen her yet, apparently. But she's in his field doing work with all of the others. And the reaper said to him, the charge of the reaper said, she came to the field that morning and says, please let me glean and gather among you sheaves after the reapers. She came, and she's continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. This is Naomi's daughter-in-law. She's a Moabite woman. She's a good worker. And the reapers noticed her also. And he's passing good information on to Boaz. It says, this woman came to work and work she was doing. She hasn't caused any problems. She hasn't tried to reap where she's not supposed to be. She stayed in her area. And Boaz is thinking, what do you think he's thinking? Just think to yourself, what do you think? A new person in my field. I know that woman. I know the background of her. So Boaz then says to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, there's a big age difference. Do not glean in any other field but this one. Keep close to my young women. I was just saying, keep in this field underneath my protection. Stay here, don't wander, stay right where you're supposed to be. Stay with the women who are normally here. They know the ins and outs of what's supposed to do. Keep your eye on the fields that they're reaping, because sometimes we go from field to field, and go after them. And I want you to know, I've not charged the young men that any of them should touch you. When you look at the history of that in the book of Judges, you find out it was easy to get caught in a field and be molested. And they had scriptures that told you what to do if that was to happen. And when you're thirsty, go to the vessel and drink where the young men have drawn. I don't want you to put yourself in a place of danger. Now, was he showing concern for her? Yeah. I tell you, dads, this is the type of man you want to have your daughters associated with. Caring, concerned, knows what's about the world, doesn't want them to get in that area. And ladies, this is what you should be looking for too. Does this man care for me? Is he looking for me? Is he willing to be a protector? Does he have those characteristics that I would look for? Boaz understood his relationship with Ruth. But she didn't understand it. She didn't know who he was in the mix of people she's coming in. She may never have heard his name. Now, Naomi knew. And I'm sure she was hoping this is the field he's going to go to. It's going to change his life. Remember what Ruth was looking for? A place to work and someone that would show favor. I know that I won't even say who it is. One of my granddaughters is here today. And one of them said to me, "Oh, Master Ruler, I need some wisdom from you. What should I look for in a boy? A young man." You know what I said to her? I said, make sure he's a baseball player and he's a catcher. Those are important characteristics. I didn't know anything about him, but she found somebody like that. But I really didn't say that. That was just part of the story. Ruth asked a question now. She fell on her face, bowed to the ground, and said to him, "Why have you found favor in me? I was looking for someone that could show favor. Why did you show favor in me?" Curiosity. I want to know. Is this the person I've been looking for? That you should take notice of me. I'm a foreigner. I'm not even part of this group yet. Ruth has realized that Boaz was caring for her. But maybe she wasn't sure of the motive, but she wanted to ask. He seemed to be very honorable. And I did seek something like this morning when I was talking with my mother-in-law. So Boaz gives a response. But Boaz said to her, "I know more about you than you think. All that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. and you left your father and your mother and your native land and came to the people that you did not know before. Ruth was a caregiver. She cared for her mother-in-law. She wanted whatever Ruth or Naomi had. She wanted your God be my God. She wanted to be part of that family. And Boaz had somehow learned this information about her before he even met her. I think there's probably somebody watching you now that knows more about you than you know about them, that's observing you just to see what kind of character you are, what's in your life, what keeps you going, what are your motives, what are your intentions, are they good? He tells her, this is a prayer he gives in verse 12, but he says it out loud. The Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, on whom the wings that you've taken refuge. He's asking God to reward her for the work that she's done. And he realized, you've come to our God under the wings of refuge. The illustration might be like a chicken taking care of the young hens, whoever you call those chickadees, in there, or any bird that takes care of it, even the penguins that keep their feet on their kids. It's an expression that she would understand. But you know how that's going to happen? You know how God is going to reward her? If you've read chapter 2, you know. He's going to use Boaz. Sometimes when you pray and ask God to help somebody, next thing you know, you're the person that God's allowing to help. He's given you the provisions to help that person. And this is what's going to happen here. I think you have to look at yourself to see. She's found favor. She was looking for it. Then she says, I found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I'm not your servant. By definition, what she was looking for, she found in this man. And said, this is the right place. But she doesn't know her relationship to him yet. She's presenting herself to him not knowing, but he knows her. And he knows his responsibility too. A good bit of the rest of this chapter is going to be on the instructions he's going to give her that very day while she's there. Look at 14 through 16. It says, and meantime Boaz said to her, come here and eat the bread and dip your morsel in the wine. And she sat beside the reaper and passed with her the roast grain. And she ate till she was full and satisfied, and she had some left over. She's not going to throw it out. She's going to take it home. But he was blessing her. He was showing favor on her more than he had shown on anybody else at the time. And when she had rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. I'm showing favor to her. She can reap where others haven't been able to. Because I want to protect her. I want to care for her. And also pull out some of the bundles for her and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. He knew her need. He knew the family situation. But he was also very caring. And this is the compassion you need from someone when sees you when you're down and you're out and you're weary, when you've gone from having a lot to having a little. You want to know there's someone that cares for you no matter what your circumstances are. Ruth doesn't have the big picture yet, but she's going to start to see it. In verses 17 and 18, so she gleans in the field until the evening, and then she beats out what she's gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley, and she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw her that she gleaned, and she also bought out and gave her the food that had been left over to satisfy her. And then they had that discussion around the family table. Isn't that a great time to talk about the day? The family table. Let me give you some guidelines for the family table if you've got teenagers. No cell phones, no iPads, no earplugs. This is just family time around the table. Now, they'll choke when you say that because, see, they can't live. The cell phone is a life source. But you have to cut them off just a little bit so they can engage in the family once again. You can get cell phones all over the place, but you only have one family. And you don't want to ignore them during the important times. Is that right, kids? Teenagers? Yeah. Very good. Thumbs up, thumb down. Okay. Well, verse 19. And her mother-in-law says to her, where'd you glean today? Normal conversation. First day at work, where'd you glean? Remember, I wanted to send you out. We had certain standards we wanted to go by. Where did you glean today? And where did you work? She's trying to narrow it down. Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law, and when she had worked, and the man's name, whom I worked with, was Boaz. And I can remember all the bells going through her head, the light coming on. Boaz. Wow. I know him. And he's about ready to share with her as she goes along about the kinsman redeemer. Now, there's nothing special about this story to the nation of Israel. They've had kinsman redeemer for the longest time. That was what expected. If you ran short of money, if you ran short of land, the kinsman redeemer. If you ran out of a male heir, it was a kinsman's redeemer to make sure this was taken care of. In verse 20, and Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness he has not forsaken, the living or the dead. And then she says, this man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. In other words, he has the responsibility to redeem you out of the situation you are and to restore you back to the right relationship where you should be in the nation of Israel. She tells her, follow his instructions. Listen to what he says. And Ruth the Moabite says, besides this, he says, you shall keep close the young men until they finish all the harvest, which would be about 6 to 7 weeks later. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with the young women, lest another field you would be assaulted. She knew the facts of life also. Proverbs, if you want to get the facts of life, is a book to read, to share with your children. There's a dad that's streetwise that's trying to make his children streetwise, at least through Proverbs 1 through 7. So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat season, and she lived with her mother. Now, as I told you before, the kinsman redeemer had the responsibility to look after his own clan. If there was someone that had a clan person that died without a joint heir to a widower, then he was the one that had to marry the widow, have a child with her, so that family name could continue. He was also the one that could redeem the land and to keep that into the family, at least wait to the Jubilee year, and it would come back anyhow. We all need to understand Jesus Christ is what we would call kinsman redeemer. He said, when we got lost, we lost our position in the family of God. We lost our relationship with God because sin separated us from what God wanted to have. Jesus Christ said, I have come in order to pay for that full penalty through my death, burial, and resurrection. I'm going to redeem you on the cross to pay that price. You have to be willing to accept what he's done for you. Redemption is a cost. And he has to remind the Corinthian church, because they want to be Christians and live in sin, listen, you're redeemed with a price. You're no longer yourself. You should be serving God. They'd forgot that he set them free from all the cares of this world. We're going through a major crisis right now, and sometimes it's easy to forget that God has not forgot about us. In Matthew 11:28-30, it says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy burden, I'll give you rest." That's a promise. "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul." He says, it's not a walk in the park, but learn how I do it. Join up with me to learn how I'm doing it, and you'll find the rest you're looking for. "For my yoke is easy, my burden is light." These are farming terms that farmers would have understood. But if you want to plow a field the right way and keep it going the straight line, you've got to have an equal oxen and oxen together pulling the same direction, or you'll be going all over the place. And I tell you, once you take your eyes off of Christ, that's what happens. You go all over the place in your directions and your work. 1 Peter chapter 5 says this, 6 and 7, "Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty God, so that you will have a proper time. You may exalt you, casting your anxieties before him, before he cares for you." God doesn't want you to carry the load you have for this crisis. He says, "Give it to me, yoke up with me, I'll take you through it." Cycles of having plenty and having a little are nothing new. The king had always said in one of his psalms, "I don't want so much I forget you, and I want so little that I'm begging from other places. I want to be able to serve you." Where's your heart been during this crisis? What about your family? What about those that you care for the most? Do they see you as a caregiver? Can you possibly be a kinsman redeemer to them of helping them out of this crisis? You have the tools to bring your family to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And above that, you have the ability to teach them how to live for Christ 24/7 without thinking they're sacrificing the things of this world. Let's pray. Our God and Heavenly Father, we're casting our burdens on the Lord this morning. And as the psalm says, he will sustain us, and he will never permit the righteous to remove. We understand that this world that we're living in is not ours. We're citizens of heaven. We have a home in heaven. We are your ambassadors. And yet, Lord, we have to be part of this world to reach them. Help us this week to get a hold of the big picture, to see that this is only part of what you're doing, and that you have a good work for us, and that we should be about doing it this week. For in your name I pray, amen.